Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Industry Luncheon from Tech Titans. My name is E.G. Nathan. I just go by Nathan from, guess where I am from? And it's my pleasure to serve as your MC and moderator of our program today. I also serve on the Tech Titans programs team that plans these monthly tech industry luncheons. And on behalf of this committee, we are delighted to bring you today's program, saluting Black History Month, with 3 outstanding CIOs from across the country. And I really mean across the country, East Coast, Central, and West Coast. Before we get started, there are a few short announcements. The programs team is pleased to have the UT Design program at the University of Texas at Dallas as the presenting sponsor of the Tech Industry Luncheon Series in 2022. For a few words about the UT Design program and UT Dallas, please welcome the Director of Corporate Relations for the Johnson School of Engineering and Computer Science, Don Rochelle. Over to you, sir, Don.
Thank you, Naden. Good afternoon, everybody, and happy Friday. I would like to take just a moment to tell everyone how the UT Design Capstone program is one of the paths out of poverty for hundreds of underserved populations of UT Dallas students each year. We now have about 30,000 students at our university, and 36% of the first-year UTD students are enrolled in the Johnson School of Engineering and Computer Science. Here's some interesting statistics. Almost 1 in 5 of our undergraduate students are first-generation college students. That means they're the very first person in their family to ever even go to college. 43.4% of our bachelor's degrees are awarded to economically disadvantaged students. Over 30% of our undergraduates receive Pell Grants, which are awarded to lower income families. Not many people know that UTD has a food pantry, which we call the Comet Cupboard, which provides meals for many hundreds of food insecure students. So when you sponsor and mentor a UT Design Capstone team, you are providing the most meaningful component of the resumes of students who will soon earn a great income for the first time in their family's history. Last year, UTD added a vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion to help ensure an even brighter future for all. UT Design Capstone student teams provide innovative solutions to their company sponsors, including companies of all sizes, from startups to giants like Raytheon, State Farm, Corvo, Murata, and Texas Instruments. These corporate sponsors have 1 or 2 semesters to try out these students for possible entry-level positions in their companies, all while working down part of their project backlog that they otherwise would not be able to address. Right now, we're signing up sponsors for engineering capstone projects to launch in May for our summer semester. Contact me for engineering projects, or Cynthia Hine, one of our other team members, for computer science projects that will launch in the fall semester. For more information about UT Design Capstone, visit our website at www.utdesign.com to learn how our students can accelerate your company's success. Let us be your engineering force multiplier. Back to you, Naden.
Thank you so much, Don. Tech Titans is starting a new tradition at the Tech Industry Luncheons by recognizing a Champions Circle member each month. Champions Circle members are those companies who have taken a premium level of membership, leadership, and engagement in Tech Titans. It is our pleasure today to recognize Champion Circle member Access, that's AXSESS, for their support and commitment to Tech Titans. We have several members of the Access team on the call today, but I want to shout out and thank Access CTO Andrew Olowu, who serves on the board of directors and chairs the Tech Titans innovation team for the company's commitment to the organization. This is where if we were in person, we would have given a round of applause. Nominations for the 2022 Tech Titans Awards Gala are open. The gala will be in October, and you are encouraged to nominate a customer, your company, or an individual who has done some remarkable things for the tech community. The list of awards and qualifications are on the Tech Titans website at techtitans.org. All nominations are submitted electronically. Last but not least, the Tech Industry Luncheon will be on the fourth Friday in March, that is March 25th, 25, and will feature the CIO of the Dallas-Fort Worth DFW International Airport, Michael Youngs. He will talk about changing landscape with the massive amount of automation and digitization our airports are undergoing in a presentation called Airport 4.0. I look forward to that. I have a couple of trips coming up. I'll have this in mind next time I travel. This will mark the return to an in-person luncheon event and will be held at the Drury Hotel in Richardson. Yay, in person. Okay, now let's get to our program today. I want to introduce, I want to say how this came about. So we were talking about, the different topics for the year, and when we saw there is, February being Black History Month, wouldn't it be nice to have leadership who actually have lived this and are experiencing it and have great thoughts on where we can go as a community? We need to get that type of a panel, and we need to benefit with their thoughts to pay our own humble salute to Black History Month. And I am so honored and privileged that the three CIOs we have today, Tanya from King County in Washington, the state of Washington, Michael from the city of Aurora, neighboring city where I live, by the way. There is some Chicago pride going on there, I must say. And Onyeka from Novant Health. All three accepted my own request to, on behalf of Tech Titans, to be here. So with that, let me start by introducing Tanya Hana, who believes using technology in new, surprising, and smart ways to ensure all King County residents can thrive. Ms. Hana oversees all teams supporting 64 lines of business within the county. That includes everything from public safety and emergency services to the healthcare, transportation, and everything in between. Tanya is passionate about ensuring King County residents have equitable access to digital technology. Note that, equitable access to digital technology. That's kind of today's theme, one of the themes. So they enjoy full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. Under her leadership, the Center for Digital Government has, for the past 4 years, recognized the King County Department of Information Technology as one of the top digital counties in the nation. KCIT has likewise been recognized for the last few years as a CIO 100 award winner for the technology innovation and other awards. That's Tanya Hana. Here again, it's when we would have applauded. Going forward to Onyeka and Nchege. Onyeka is SVP, by the way, Onyeka is no stranger to the Tech Titans community. That's what I am hearing. I'm getting pinged, oh, it is Onyeka. Yes, we have him today. Onyeka is SVP, Chief Information Officer for Novant Health, a super regional healthcare system with one of the largest medical groups in the US. Onyeka and his teams oversee growth initiatives and deliver the world-class consumer capabilities, differentiating technologies and advanced clinical solutions that allow the integrated system to provide remarkable patient care. Onyeka has served as CIO at Toyota Industries Commercial Finance, the Cooper Institute, Interstate Batteries, and the Coca-Cola Bottling Company Consolidated. In these roles, Onyeka has been accountable for fulfilling the corporate purpose while modeling leadership and stewarding talent, culture, and strategy to create sustainable value. Additionally, he has led transformations through the development and implementation of digital strategies, resulting in successful IT and digital business transformation in varied industries and organizations. Onyeka regularly speaks at community and industry events and is a graduate of Georgia State University's J. Mac Robinson College of Business. Applause for Onyeka. Michael Pegues was appointed by Mayor Richard C. Irwin as the first ever African American CIO for the city of Aurora, Illinois in June 2017. I think I'm just about 10 miles from the city. Michael began his career working in various IT support roles for AT&T and PepsiCo in the greater Chicago area. Michael has worked for the US Department of Defense as a civilian automation management officer at the US Army Logistical Readiness Center in Vicenza, Italy. In addition, Michael has held various senior IT positions in HP France, Vodafone Hungary, and Morgan Stanley in Budapest, Hungary, and New York. Michael holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from DeVry University and executive MBA in entrepreneurship and innovation management from Central European University Business School from Budapest, Hungary. I lose count of the number of awards that Michael has received for his thought leadership by various CIO and smart cities organizations over the past 3 to 5 years. Michael is a proud United States Army veteran, and on behalf of Tech Titans and everyone today, I thank him for his service. With that, I'm going to share my screen and talk about, I want to share some very simply put facts. Facts that actually came out in a report that was published by IBM. And let me change screens here, apologies. Hold on. There we go. So this is an IBM Institute for Business Value survey with 1,500 Black executives and business leaders who were surveyed between May 2020 and January 2021. So not that far back. The link is live. I will post that in the chat, and you can actually see the survey later. But some stark facts that we are living with today. In the S&P 500, out of all the executives listed in the proxy statements, 5 out of 279, 1.8% were Black, including 2 who recently retired. Based on the responses from this leadership, the findings include pervasive discrimination persists throughout society and in the workplace. Even though anti-racism has established a toehold, corporate diversity efforts lag aspirations. The support for Black professionals is inadequate, and wellness efforts aren't connecting. And the numbers kind of make the point. Even though there are programs in place with on-the-job training, formal and informal mentorship, the Black leaders do not realize the same level of benefits from those as their counterparts. There is this cliche phrase, anyone can succeed in America if they work hard, but it is not really true for everyone. You can see the disparity in the numbers between, again, the Black leaders and the counterparts. But there is hope. I did not intentionally want to, I cannot even paint a rosy picture even if I wanted to. This is the reality that we are living with today. But there is hope. There is hope. There is a call to action for our community. And the reason why there is hope is because of the leaders like Tanya and Michael and Onyeka who are amidst us today. So I'm going to open it up. We are going to have dialogue. Keep the questions coming. Please chat them. And really, the conversation is that the theme is to pay salute to the Black History Month, the Tech Titans way. But I will start off by posing a few questions, and I would request all three of you to jump in. It's a conversation, nothing formal here. So I want to start by the contributions that we have had from Black leadership over the years, your own perspective. I certainly do not claim knowledge about all the details. I am aware of some, but not all. But just sharing your perspective on how have Black leaders contributed in the history, from a technology perspective. Please jump in. I don't want to call out any particular CIO here.
Hey, Nana, thank you. Appreciate that. I'll start off and certainly ask my colleagues to jump in. Let me start out by saying, I'm incredibly humbled and just appreciative of being on the same platform with Tanya and Michael, right? So when you think about the question that you're asking, perspectives of Black leadership, well, this is Black leadership, right? And so I just want to appreciate the individuals that are on here. And as you read out their biography, one of the things that hit me is, man, I wish others would hear this, right? Because oftentimes we don't hear our own story, right? And we don't see our own people that are doing the things that Michael and Tanya and others in this industry are doing, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So when I think about my perspective, there's a lot of work to be done across STEM fields in terms of access, equity, representation, and your facts kind of allude to the fact that while we have come a long way, there is still more work to be done. And so when I think about leaders, Black leaders, my mind goes immediately to what do we, Onyeka, Michael, Tanya, what do we do? What are we doing? And what can we do to make sure that each one reach one, each one teach one? How do we reach back and for lack of a better word, snatch up the ones that are behind us and bring them forward? Those are the kinds of thoughts that kind of hit my mind. It's great to know that there have been some accomplishments that have been made by the three of us on this call, but my mind goes to, all right, how do I make sure that the generation behind me, the generation behind the one behind me, how do I make sure that those folks get pulled forward and that they have opportunities that either I didn't have or I didn't even know existed, right? How do I make sure that I expose some of the things that I now know, right? How do I make sure that I expose that to others? So I'm a glass half full kind of guy anyway. So I'm always gonna see some of that rosiness that you talk about because it's just what I do. But I also very quickly go to, all right, how do I make sure that we are both bringing the next generation along with us? So that's kind of how I would think through that. Michael, Tanya?
So, Onyeka, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I am a half glass full kind of person as well. When we think back over history, the legacy of Black leadership has been one of excellence throughout time, and it's built on resiliency. I don't think we talk enough about access to opportunities, access to others who can bring us along, because we're here standing on the shoulders of those that have come before us. And we forget about the contributions made by those. I mean, if you think back, Dr. Charles Drew and bank blood and plasma research, which was the foundation of the modern Red Cross blood bank. We forget about how significant these contributions are. It's also important for us Black leaders to make pathways for those that are coming behind us and helping to raise awareness of what opportunities look like. I remember a few years ago, I was actually speaking at a church, and I was speaking to an 8-year-old young boy who was very much into video games. He's raised by his grandmother. And his grandmother was like, I'm trying to get him interested in STEM, but he won't put down his video games. And I said, well, there are so many opportunities here with video games. And I started to talk to him and his grandmother about it, and raise the fact that Nintendo North America's headquarters, they're literally 8 miles away from it. And they didn't have access or awareness of it because they're low income, certainly in a failing school. And I still talk to this family to this day about helping to create opportunities so that he can succeed and see what the world looks beyond where he is today. And I think that is incredibly important for us. I don't know if Michael has some additional thoughts.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Tanya. And I agree with both of you. I really think it's about kind of looking forward, right? And when, we're talking about how race affects leadership, specifically in the tech industry, I mean, there's studies out there today that basically suggest when people of color are given access to these leadership positions, they will still face challenges and constraints, from their colleagues and their supporters, just due to those power inequities that privilege our white counterparts. Now, I'm not taking anything away from that, because I'm not the type of person that kind of look to say, here's my barriers. I'm always looking forward, right? And I'd also just like to kind of acknowledge and be very intentional that, that isolation of Black success within the IT space is real, right? Over my 30 years career, including 19 of those years being, overseas working for Department of Defense and Fortune 100 companies, none of my mentors or my sponsors look like me, right? With the exception of my current Mayor Irving, right, who is the first African-American mayor in Aurora's history in 180 years, right? Now, being aware of that information, we have to be purposeful and intentional in terms of how we're looking to pay it forward. And going back to that, as a CIO, when I came in, and mind you, when I came into this job, the job title was CTO, but I was like, I'm not a chief technology officer, I'm a chief information officer. And here's the difference. The CTO focuses only on technology. The CIO manages people, the business aspect of how technology run and benefits not just the city, specifically the staff, but departments, divisions, citizens, and also the residents, right, throughout that area. And with that, we've been intentional about setting up what we call the Aurora STEAM Academy, which is a STEAM-based program that is subsidized by the City of Aurora through a public-private partnership with City of Aurora, one of our STEM providers called TinkerWorks. They're a K-8 STEM provider, and APS Training Institute, which is the training arm. They provide infrastructure. And when we started off this pilot in 2020, we focused on 50 kids in the disenfranchised communities. We proved out that pilot and that concept. 2021, we asked for $100,000 and we were targeting 750 kids. And we hit that target in 2021. Now in 2022, we're targeting 1,600 disenfranchised kids, average to moderate income. They have to meet that criteria because the subsidy is coming from grants and the government. And basically, I mean, we're off to the races here in 2022. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because we're talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, and we're talking about breaking down the barriers of the digital divide. We have to focus on the kids so they actually have a future, right? In that way that they can reach back and help up others. You know, this is a process and it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, we all know that, right? I mean, that's obvious, but we got to pay it forward and we got to educate and we got to give them that access to resources and educate them how to use that.
Excellent. Thank you, all three of you. I love the way that, it just rolled off where Onyeka, level set, and Tanya shared some, historical facts. I didn't know about the Red Cross connection. Thank you, Tanya, for sharing that. And Michael talked about steps that Michael is taking through in his role at the city of Aurora, and again, Chicago pride going there. So I'm curious, what about, steps that you have taken? Michael spoke about, how being intentional about doing things for the next generation and so on. But are there steps that Onyeka, Tanya, you can share that you are doing from, in your organizations, just like Michael was talking about?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with Michael. Things that we can do for kids is incredibly important. My team, we actually work with some schools here in the local Pacific Northwest area. And it involves a couple of things. Certainly, we provide advice and guidance on technology, but also from our position in government, we are doing things around digital literacy, expanding broadband, right? Because if you don't have the infrastructure to connect, because you're in a community where affordability of internet is a problem, you have to help with that, providing digital literacy, not only for the children, but their families. So how do you be safe online? Just having awareness of cybersecurity, how to protect your privacy, understand dangers. Like we've heard metaverse is coming, but some of the real world crime that happens in real life happens within the metaverse. Putting that out there as well, and helping with devices. It is incredibly important when you're on digital, you need a device, whether it's a Chromebook, a laptop, a tablet, a smartphone, because that gains you access to services and information. When I was a kid, we used to have the encyclopedia. Now you go online to find your information. And if you don't have those things, you can't help. You are already at a disadvantage. And we have to step beyond it. One of the other things that I think we tend to forget about that we are actually doing here out in King County is we're also working with the criminal justice system and trying to provide tech skills to those who have been within the criminal justice system. Because how can you break that cycle? and you have to provide you have to provide access. And so we're doing training, how to code, and we're providing actual opportunities within our organization to be able to use those skills so that you can go and work somewhere else and potentially turn your life around. And finally, my other thought is, how can, public and private, similar to what Michael talked about, partner together, right? Because it takes a community to help out all members. And that's how you uplift all boats. And I particularly find that mission extremely important, since I represent Dr. Martin Luther King County, and what his legacy represents.
Thank you, Tanya. Onyeka, I must say, before I come to you, there is an interesting dynamic of, two of the CIOs being from the public sector and you being from the private sector. So we have a really nice blend, I would say. And I'm curious about steps that, Novant has taken, you have taken, but more importantly, what can private sector companies do? I think we heard some really great steps from both Michael and Tanya from a public sector perspective. So if you could weigh in on that, Onyeka.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I think, sometimes we try to boil the ocean, I'm going to call it, when in reality, there's some really simple things that can be done, right? So as simple as it sounds, engage, right? Engage in recruiting, engage in hiring, engage in being really intentional about, bringing in diversity into your organization. And in this case, we're talking about African Americans primarily. So as simple as it sounds, that is one thing that I think everyone can do. So, I've had people ask me, hey, Onyeka, I want to hire, a diverse candidate. I'm going to post it on LinkedIn and see if we get any takers. And one of the things I always say to them is, all right, so are you going to post it or do you want me to post it? Because if I'm talking to my white counterpart, the reality is, white facts, the reality is sometimes his or her LinkedIn profile and followers may not necessarily be as diverse as you would like for it to be. So you're not going to reach the people that you want. So if we're really being truthful about how we might impact this, then I think we have a conversation about, hey, you post and I post, and hopefully our chances go up that we get the level of candidate that you would like from a diversity perspective. So that's one thing. And I just think that the real simple things that we can do. I take that a step further and say, just at Novant Health, we've established a clear vision and strategic plan that really involves embedding diversity, inclusion, and equity throughout our organization, and then developing some system-wide metrics to measure that. For example, go back to what Michael was talking about. If you're going to reach folks, reach them when they're young, right? So our IT organization, we refer to it as the Digital Products and Services Organization, for probably a very similar reasons to why, Michael, you said CIO versus CTO, right? It's an IT organization, but man, we do so much more than just information technology. We're really all about how do we digitize the products that we put in place. But one of the things I'm really excited about is we created a student team member program, which affords students the opportunity to participate in career readiness workshops, as well as paid and unpaid internships, primarily within the Digital Products and Services Organization. And participants have the opportunity to work with leaders across the Digital Products and Services team. We're learning from innovators across a range of sectors, right? So we put them in opportunities that allow them to not just do work where you might see some typical interns come in and you're trying to find them. So no, our student interns really get involved in our business and truly try to understand what do we do, how do we do it, and then we engage them from a fresh mind to ask the question, how can we help? So we're very intentional about saying, how do we go get the folks that we believe we want within our organization that we can showcase what we do. I'll share one last thing, just perspective. And this is a personal piece for me. I've been in the tech space. I've been a CIO for many years. When I came to Novant Health and interviewed at Novant Health, that was the first time in my career where I interviewed for a CIO seat and interviewed with someone of African American descent at the highest levels. I've never been interviewed by an African American, right? So think about that. Yep, Michael, I see.
Yeah.
Never been interviewed by an African American, right? What does that say, right? But then I get to Novant Health, and my goodness, you look at you can go look online. Our executive team, we walk the talk and talk the walk, but it's very intentional, right? And I realized that after I got it, the organization is very intentional about, all right, how do we make sure that we put a leadership team, a senior leadership team, and a management team that is representative of the communities that we serve, right? How do we make sure that there's representation? So anyway, I thought that was interesting at the time.
Certainly a sign of, we are headed in the right direction. I'm so glad to hear you interviewed with an African-American leader. Michael is working for an African-American leader. So we are certainly on the right track. Even then, long ways to go. We have taken baby steps. I want to stick with you, Onyeka, for a reason. So
not hand. Can
Yes.
I just add one thing to what
Please.
Previous one? Yeah, I've never ever been interviewed by anyone that's African American in this space ever. Apart from the mayor of Aurora, right? But he's not even in space. I mean, he's a politician, right? So that is a key data point, right? That needs to be kind of emphasized, right? However, and I did mention before that, I have never, ever had a mentor or sponsor who looks like me until now. However, that does not prevent African-American leaders from seeking out diversified mentors or sponsors to help them forward as well. So just being very clear about that, because it can work reciprocal, to help push, that Black influence in the IT space forward. And when I came to the city of Aurora, there was in the IT space, there was I think there was one African-American woman in that space. And that was back in 2017, right? And it was more in a staff level position, right? Today, we have 6 African-Americans that are within the IT department, right? We also have we have 2 that are actually Asian American, and one of those being a female, right? In a leadership position in cybersecurity, right? And we have 5 Hispanics, back when I came in, there was only 1. So when we talk about being intentional with regards to the recruitment, that means getting in there and basically being part and developing that resource and strategy to try to push, the equity, diversity, inclusion. Because you hear a lot of companies, they'll promote equity, diversity, and inclusion, but it's just at the entry level positions, the roles. My question is can I see your board? Can I see your senior executive leadership team? Matter of fact, I don't even ask the question. I go out and do my research before, right? Because you have to look at those organization values and really kind of scratch beneath the surface to understand what the DNA and the culture of any organization is, right? So, again, it's just being aware of that and not letting those barriers kind of block you, with a fixed mindset and kind of moving past that. So I just wanted to add that in there as well. So
very valuable, Michael. And I'm also, I'm excited, a year from now, or even tomorrow, somebody will be able to say that I have Michael as my mentor. I have Michael as my supervisor, Onyeka as my leader, and Tanya as my interviewer. So the number of times that this will be said going forward can only go up, thanks to leaders like yourself. So yeah, again, we are on the right track. And thank you. Jump in, by the way. Anyone can just ask me to stop, and you have the right to ask me to be silent. No problem. I want to ask a different question, and this is, we are all working for corporations where we have to make the business case, numbers matter. That's just a given. That's part of our day job, and that's where this question is coming from. When I make a proposition to my leadership, or even to a customer, there is always this question: what are the benefits? What's the business case? What's the ROI, the time to value? And these are all common cliche phrases that are asked. I'm just curious, do you get asked the question as to, are we really better off with this type of diverse leadership? I mean, yes, it's a good thing to do. It's like diet and exercise. That's how I think. But then there may be an element of skepticism. There may be questions, okay, we have increased Black leadership. That's great. But are we doing better because of that? What's the connection? Do you get asked the question? I have a problem with that question being asked. I'm not really asking, how do you address that? I'm curious, do you face that type of pushback or gentle, challenge as to, is this really worth it? Do you get those types of questions? That I'm curious. I don't know.
I'll start off. I don't get those questions. I'm sure they're probably asked. I have no doubts that it's in people's minds. I don't get asked that question, but I will admit, I do ask myself that question, right? And I ask myself that question from a place of, as I look at my team and I look at my teams, I ask myself, do I have enough diversity of thought, diversity from an ethnicity perspective, diversity, right? Just all facets. I ask myself that question because I have been a part of teams that have been diverse for a long time. And by diverse, I'm not just talking ethnicity, right? So I always want to make sure that I have representation on my teams that bring thought leadership that is different across the board. What I don't want to do is have 4 or 5 vice presidents that report into me and they all think the same, look the same, feel the same, right? Then I know we're not going to move the needle at all, right? So I tend to ask that question of myself because I have seen progress with that. And then the other thing I would say is, right, again, it's always largely unsaid. But the reality is, as an African American and as African Americans, we always feel like, and I think it's real for me anyway, that I always have to show up better than I believe everyone else probably believes they should show up. I always feel that, right? And so I'm always running 100,000 miles faster, probably that I should. And some of it is self-imposed, but it's because I want to make sure that now that I'm here, I don't let down the ones behind me that are coming, right? And so I always tend to think if I surround myself with diversity of all kinds, then my expectation is that they're going to run just as hard and as fast as I am, right? Because my father said to me many years ago when I was a little boy, it's a Longfellow quote, and it says, "The heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but while their companions slept, were toiling up in the night." And that to me just kind of signifies what I think about when I look across my teams and I see the diversity across that team. I know that folks they're running 100 miles an hour, and I support that.
Do you read poetry or write poetry, Onyeka?
No, I don't.
You're so good with that quote. I cannot, rattle it off like you just did. That was fantastic.
You gotta remember that's one that my father put in me a long when I was just a little boy. So he has reminded me of that many, many times over.
That was very insightful, Onyeka. Tanya, Michael, the question I asked earlier, feel free to share your own thoughts.
I think studies have shown that African American leaders, we're the ones that are helping to increase diversity within our organizations because we champion efforts to bring those along with us. Over time, even at the county, increasing diversity, it's not something that is a plan or a talking point. For me, it's an action. It represents how I view Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy, how I think about and how I show up, similar to Onyeka and Michael, right? I know that I have to be better than everyone else. And I guide myself that way each and every day. Increasing diversity, always at the top of the list. And I've had similar experiences. I've never actually worked for anyone that looks like me.
Not yet.
Not yet. Matter of fact, I've actually never worked for a woman at this point in time. To be perfectly honest, throughout my entire career, I've actually never worked for a woman. And I think companies should recognize that their organizations are better when they have diversity of thought, diversity of people, because you're bringing in experiences and perspectives that if you just had someone else that wasn't part of that echo chamber that could highlight, we'll see from time to time, on the news where a company did something and they faced backlash. Well, it's a result of not having others in the room to highlight, hey, that could be a problem for you. And I think it behooves all of us to really think about what can we do within our own companies to help. There was the McKinsey study on leadership, women leadership in 2021, and it looked across all the ethnicities and women. And what they found is organizations that have women leaders, they found out that the women leaders actually makes it better for all employees. And I think those are just things that we should think about as we're going about day to day. When I was coming up, I learned to play golf because all the men went golfing. How could I be in the room for any opportunities if I'm not even in the conversation or on the same plane as everyone else? I might not play well, but I can, but it does matter, right? Those opportunities, I think Michael or Onyeka mentioned that, you're posting on LinkedIn. Well, sometimes those opportunities are already targeted for someone. And if you're not even in the room or someone doesn't think about you because they don't have a relationship with you, right? Because how you find opportunities is not only in the professional office space. A lot of those activities take place outside of work.
Yep.
And who's going to speak up and say, oh, I know Tanya, I know Michael, here's a great candidate for you. And so I would encourage people to think beyond them, their networks, and reach out to other networks to help identify people.
Thank you.
Tanya, I would, if you don't mind, I'll just tag on just to what you were just saying. I wrote a blog post many years ago around the fallacies of hard work, because there's a misconception that if I work hard, I will get there. If I work hard, I will get there. And the reality is, when conversations are being held about a potential opportunity or a role, the truth of the matter is you're not in the room when those conversations are happening, nor is your hard work, by the way, in the room to speak for you. So if you don't have advocacy, right? If you don't have the advocacy in the room to speak for you, you don't even get mentioned in the conversation, right? And here you are sitting down going, I'm working as hard as I can, and this is going to pay off. And the reality is what you're speaking to is relationships. If you don't have the resident relationships that you need, and relationships, strategic relationships that are in the room where the conversations are happening, that can advocate for you, then you may find that it probably doesn't work out quite the way you think it's going to. So excellent point, Tanya.
Right.
I want to come to you, Michael, but I want to give a heads up on a question so that you have some time, all three of you, to give some thought to that. I'll ask it later, but I'll frame the question now. Can you describe a situation in which you had to disarm individuals and make a meeting a success? Put that in the parking lot. If you were in person, that would be like on that flip chart on the right. But Michael, please go ahead, sir. You were going to share your thoughts. I'm very interested. Please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a dovetail, for someone who I pretty much spent my whole career, navigating predominantly white workspaces, in Europe, and I was faced with a plethora of different contradictions regarding who I am in my presence here, right? And when we talk about, why is it so important? Because cultivating that Black leadership matters, because it helps to cultivate, a sense of belonging, true inclusion, and a pipeline to success and up and coming Black leaders. That's why we're here today, right? And, these are the things that we need to recognize, because really, in order to actually, for us to cultivate that Black leadership, we must first realize that, these structures of racism are inherently embedded in all of these organizations. If you're not aware of something and you can't identify it, how can you solve the problem, right? So awareness is very much key here, and, there's other aspects of it that come along about helping to close the income gap. We talk about, emotional intelligence and being more empathetic. Well, that equals innovation, equity, diversity, and inclusion, right? So if we really want to look at, an increase in trajectory in terms of seeing Black leadership, we need to promote the visibility and that awareness and create these safe spaces for people to basically express themselves and be authentic to who they are, because if I can't be me, right? And I do consider one of my core values as being authentic, right? And I bring that power to work, right? And I can't express my full self, then that's a problem. You can't be creative like that. You're being restrained. Stay in place. Don't get out of line, right? So, create that safe space for people to really, to kind of, dig into that real aptitude and that talent, right? That's the value that Black leadership will bring if we let it in, right? So, recognizing, again, that inherent structures is important. We need to cultivate those leaders who can assume those, those senior leadership roles and, have the power and that positional authority to kind of make that change, to the cultures and the space we inhabit. If we remember, what did Barack Obama say? The change starts with you. So that's where you got to dig into.
Excellent, Michael. I will change starts with you. That could even be the title of the article that would come out after this session.
Yeah, you got to send me you got to send me a check for that one now.
Yes. Hey, we're not that far. I will definitely take you out for a drink. You know, we are right here. So.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
So I do want to come back to that question because I sense there is a storytelling aspect to that. You know, again, the situation in which you had to disarm individuals, and quite frankly, you know, unconscious bias. People act in ways even without realizing. It is. I guess all I can say is it is funny. You know, when you see people doing things, and it's not like they are putting on an act or anything. That's just how their brain has been wired. And then when they are exposed, when they are told, they are like, oh my God, how could I do that? There is that type of realization. So any stories, if you have, that would be fantastic, because it actually, I cannot think of a better way to hit that sentiment, to make the point. And so I love that question.
I'll share a quick story.
Yes.
So for me, this was several years back. I was in a meeting with a partner, vendor, and I had it was myself and my leadership team that was in there. And I remember the gentleman that was presenting, you know, he was talking, and I have a habit of not sitting at the head of the table. Just how I am. I just don't do that. And so he kept looking at, as he was going through his presentation, he kept looking at one of my managers at the head of the table and addressing him as he was talking, which was fine. And at some point, you could tell it just got awkward in the room because the manager kept looking at me, right? As he's talking, he's steady doing this number. So try to shift his gaze over to, look, I'm not the decision maker, he is. And you know, this kept going. And meanwhile, I'm steady asking questions, right? And God just ignores, keeps at it. And then at the very end, he says, okay, so do we think we can, he's not looking at me, he's looking at my guy. He says, do you think we can seal the deal on this? And finally, ICE looks at him and says, yeah, you should ask him that question. And he looks over at me and I said, you know, that's a great question. And I don't look at him as I'm answering the question. I'm looking at ICE, right? And I'm saying, yeah, that's a great question. You know, do you think we can seal this or not? And I asked the team to leave the room. And I sat down with the vendor and I said, listen, unconscious bias. And I used those exact words, unconscious bias. You made the assumption, first off, you didn't do your research, right? So you should have researched who we were and who's in the room. That's first things first. Secondly, unconscious bias. You made the assumption very clear, despite all the signals that you got, both from the guy at the table and myself with my questions, you just made the assumption and you stuck with it. Not going to happen today. Not going to happen at all. And that's how the meeting ended.
Well done, sir.
Onyeka, I actually have to say, you know how many times that's happened with me, right? So how I changed up, I make sure I sit at the head of the table to avoid those type of awkward situations, right? Because it's happened a numerous amount of times. So.
Yeah, but you can't always sit at the head of the table. But I agree. Certainly have been in that particular situation. And the other thing that strikes me is about unconscious bias. We always assume that the loudest person in the room is always the most knowledgeable, the ones that are driving change. And a lot of times they are not. It is sometimes the quiet people, as I call myself, who's sitting there listening. I ask a lot of questions because I'm formulating all kinds of scenarios. And I think it's important that people don't underestimate people just when you meet them, because there's a story to all of us. We are shaped by our lived experiences, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. And what I most appreciate about the Black leaders I've met is that they always bring their authentic self. We are who we are. We show up in ways that people cannot imagine because of our legacy of resiliency against whatever odds, whether it's being the only woman, the only Black, the only, so many times in my early career, I was the only. And you still make a way. So, unconscious bias is real. It shows up every day in all kinds of situations.
I do have a question on the last comment that you made. You were the only. And there is this notion of a token representation. Oh, we have to have, diversity, ESG metric. So let's check the box on a woman, check the box on an African American. And just because they have one, there is this perception that, okay, they are doing good. Do you see that? And well, let me reframe the question. I know it is happening. I don't even have to ask whether you see that. You obviously see that. What can Black leadership do? And I'm being very intentional here because it is for the Black leadership to take action. Just like Onyeka was saying, it makes a difference if he posts it on LinkedIn, the job rec, versus somebody else. So what are some steps that can be taken so that you no longer have to be the only, Tanya? It's high time.
I think for companies that, and today, we treat some of DEI, diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging, whatever organizations call the buzzwords, as a badge. That if you look at my company, you see I support these efforts. For someone like me, I'm like Michael, you got to go beyond what these public statements are on supporting DEI efforts, and really find out, do they walk the walk? Is the leadership really about supporting and bringing in other voices? Because if it's not, just being the only one doesn't necessarily change anything if there's no advocacy within the organization. Whether or not, there's the sponsorship and really trying to change culture. Because organizations have culture. And if it's a culture that doesn't support it, it doesn't matter whether or not you have an only, right? You will remain a token. And I've been in organizations like that. Like nothing changes, right? We have meetings, you have meetings, you pretend that you're going to change. It's kind of like me, or where I say I'm gonna have healthy food habits, and then I go eat a box of chocolate. It doesn't change. What changes is when cultures really have, and it starts at the top. Let's just be real. It starts at the top, whether or not the most senior leadership is supportive of efforts to help change culture.
Thank you, Tanya. I know we are going over, but it's because I'm not sensing people dropping, and I'm getting positive commentary that, thanks to your insights, all three of you, it is, it's a very engaging conversation. So we do take the liberties to go over if the audience is receptive. That's why we have gone over. So thank you for staying. Um, I do have, so I'm curious if you have any thoughts, Onyeka or Michael, on the aspect of the being the only, checking the box with a token presence. Any thoughts, please go ahead and share. And I do have a couple of closing questions and comments.
Right. I'll add, if you want to be a true advocate of change, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because, it's just a proven fact and statistic. Not everybody is going to be that individual, right? It's few and far between. So, even from a leadership perspective, I always kind of preach and also support my leaders in saying, you need to be comfortable, right? Because if you're not in those spaces of uncomfortability, you're going to limit yourself, with that fixed mindset. You won't be able to grow, right? So, it is a aspect, I think, of learning. And also it's that we just got to remember that, that social innovation can never be a project run for one group of people for the benefit of another group of people. If we want something, we got to go and do it ourselves. No one's going to do it better than us, right? And even if someone else does it, they're not going to do it right because they can't understand the inflections, the history, it's just not possible, right? So you just got to get out there and do it,
Thank you, Michael.
Good point. Good point, Michael. If you don't mind, I'll just add two points and I will, stop. First off, I agree with Tanya and Michael. If it is not at the very highest levels within your organization, an initiative that you live and breathe every day, then it doesn't stand a chance. So, and I always talk about Novant, where I am, Novant Health, right? Our board makes certain we prioritize diversity, inclusion, equity, and it is a topic that's included on each meeting agenda that we have, right? Because our board wants to do that. Secondly, you have to have team members that are courageous enough to say, yo, what's happening up there? How come I don't see that, right? If you create an environment where your team members have the courage to say something, enforce it. So it's almost a top-down and bottom-up approach that says, no, we say we're going to do this and we mean it. And then you give your folks permission to call you out on it if they don't see it happening, right? So that's the other thing I'd say. And then lastly, I'll pitch a plug for, like where do you find talent? Historically, Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, right? So 10% of all African-American students are at HBCUs. 20% of all graduating African-American students come out of HBCUs, right? I have two kids that are at HBCUs today. And I've had an opportunity to get to meet some of the students that come out of these colleges. They're friends, they're upperclassmen, right? They are some of the brightest minds that we have. Create a program, right? And the schools are always looking for corporations to create a program that comes into the school and figures out a way to pull those 20% of all African-American graduating students that come out of these HBCUs, right? So there are things that can be done. So the way you started out, my friend, there is hope for sure.
Excellent. So I want to share my screen. I was taking copious notes as you were talking, and I want to share. Yes, to your point, Onyeka, there is hope, but what can we do? And I'm going to share a few bullets, but I'm also going to frame a question in that process, because this is a call where I see there are individuals, different corporations represented, like yours. There are universities, there is academia, there are organizations like Tech Titans. There's me wearing this hat. my question is, there is such a diverse audience. What's the call to action for them? You talked, you shared great insights about what you have done, intend to do. What can we do as a community? I fully respect what Michael said about, we have to do it for ourselves, but hey, let's see what we can do together and think about that while I share what I captured. So if you have additional thoughts to capture, and with that, I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if I can get there. There we go. So, but there is hope. And while we are saluting, these are your statements that I just kind of did some refrigerator magnet magic, if you will. So Black leadership can bring value. That's obvious if we let it in. That's key. I think I heard Michael say that. If we let it in, that's so key. We need to have advocacy in the room, because if you're not aware, how can you solve the problem? So that's the reason for the advocacy. I heard Michael say, creating safe spaces. And I heard Onyeka talk about having the courage to say something. So we need to create the safe spaces so that, the Black leadership included, everyone can actually have the courage. And then I heard Michael say, if we want something, we have to do it ourselves. But I don't want it to be that way. I don't want the world to be one where the Black community has to do it for themselves. We can be better. And therein lies my question for you. What can all of us do to help the Black, leadership and the African Americans to come up? What's our call to action? Take a minute, each one of you, and I will continue to take notes.
I mean, I think you said it yourself. It's the advocacy, right? That's the biggest piece. Because again, as I mentioned before, most of my mentors were, I can go through them, English, white male, a Latino female, a French man, a white male, right? And also a Greek man that all supported me. And I am thankful to all of them. And they drove advocacy, right? Because they saw something in me and believed. So that's what I would say. Focus on the advocacy. That's how others can help.
So Tanya, I must say, Michael is one up on you. He has worked for a woman, is what I heard. So.
Yes.
And she was no joke. She was not a joke. She didn't play.
I would agree with Michael. Opportunities. It's amazing. Opportunities are always coming towards people where they'll say, "Hey, can you tell me who? I've got an opening. I'm looking for someone to be a vice president or whatnot." I would say open up your networks, right? And reach out, because some of the people that would be a total asset to your company may not be in the room. Yep. And if you don't help, how can we increase, diversity?
Thank you, Tanya. And Onyeka, I see what you chatted, but I just want to hear you say it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times when this question comes up, I think natural tendency is to try to think of some grandiose thing that you can do, that we all can do, to try to make a difference. And sometimes, again, I've said it earlier, it's just the little things that we do, right? So if I profess to want to do something to make a difference, then start with awareness, right? Start with just simply acknowledging that you recognize that there is an issue, right? Because then that hopefully aligns your behavior with that acknowledgement, right? So if you go, man, okay, I see it. And then to Michael's point, reach out. There are a number of up and coming African-American leaders, tech leaders out there that are doing some really great work in their organizations, whether they're an analyst, they're a manager, they're a supervisor, they're whatever they are. Reach out and see if you can become a mentor, right? So a brain to pick, an ear to listen, a push in the right direction. See if you can become someone that can help move the needle, right? As opposed to sitting on the sideline going, I wish they'd do that, right? Don't wish someone can do something, be the change.
Excellent. What I heard was be the advocate, open up your networks, increase awareness by reaching out, be the change. Fantastic. I cannot think of a better closing comment than that. And we are 16 minutes over. I can go on, but I do want to bring this to closure. Thank you again. It is our privilege, my privilege, to have all three of you here together, presenting such complementing perspectives with a common goal and common theme. And I would say, I'm not, in the history of Tech Titans, this may possibly be the very best salute that Tech Titans has paid to Black History Month. I'll just go right out and say that.